all need an outside third party person, mentor, coach, whatever word you want to use, who can really help us take a step back into our situation, into the business. As I mentioned before, that bird's eye view. It's really hard not to get stuck in the weeds because you eat, breathe, and sleep it on a daily basis. And I'm just a huge believer. The results I've seen by having coaches and mentors and trainers, you can liken it to a personal trainer also, right? Most people who hire someone to get a certain result and have that extra layer of accountability, they end up performing and achieving a level of results much higher.
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hare. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
Some attorneys are great at practicing law, but when it comes to running a business, a lot of attorneys come up short. And that's no different than any other business out there. Because at the end of the day, running a successful business requires putting processes and procedures in place, and sometimes having a third party really come in to help leaders move beyond survival mode and produce profitable results. Our guest today does exactly that. Let's welcome Erica Caviness. Erica, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to see you, my friend.
Likewise. So yeah, we go way back. Before we kind of get into today, so you started as like a case manager at a law firm. Is that what I understand?
I did. I was a case manager at a Social Security disability law firm. So that's where I really cut my teeth in the legal industry, so to speak. And I had such a wonderful experience there. I was actually ready to go to law school, and then life had other plans. So we can talk more about that as we get into it.
I love that. So I think it's really cool. Like, it's always important. You see so many business coaches, and like some of them have stories of like, oh, like you do, like I kind of started in the trenches and worked my way up. And others, it's kind of like, well, it feels like you're not really sure how our business runs because you've never like been in it. So that's awesome that you have really
Right.
like been in it from the beginning. So let's talk about that. If you want to talk about life's other plans, you can. But how did you get into coaching?
So while I was working as the case manager in the law firm, I was, in the process of expanding my network. I met some phenomenal folks who were in the coaching and training business and essentially got recruited. I had a direct referral into a training and coaching company, and just immediately when I took the job, I felt a strong calling that this is where I'm really going to land long term. At the time, it was in the medical industry, but that ended up translating quite nicely to the legal industry over the years. And it was one of those things where I just felt a very strong pull to influence others in a different way via the coaching and training that I was blessed to be able to jump in and hit the ground running and really make an impact with those that I was working with. And there's just no greater feeling to me.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that transition for you then. So I think there's probably this general understanding, which I personally believe is true, that the two most difficult professions to work with generally and to tell that they're wrong about anything are lawyers and doctors. So I don't know why you chose the two most difficult sectors to
Right.
tackle for your career. You probably could have gotten much less pushback working with anyone else in the world. But
Yeah. Well,
but what was that like working with medical professionals, like kind of walking them through their business and maybe telling them, hey, there's a better way to do this thing?
yeah. So I think that's definitely a normal occurrence, what you're describing. But I was really blessed to find some exceptions, and I was, able to come into contact with some really open-minded clients who really wanted to grow, and they wanted, that outside third party advice to really kind of, get that bird's eye view of their business and look at different ways of doing things. So, that there's always been, both camps, so to speak, of folks who are open-minded and want to grow and are willing to listen to outside advice, and apply best practices. And then there's some who are just, really, really committed, let's say, to keeping things as they are, but they still want the results. So I think you're always going to see that in any industry. But I just really try to lead with, as corny as this may sound, lead with my heart and lead with results. And, having that desire and ability to break through to others, especially when they are resistant, I think that sort of helped me stand out in the pack in certain circumstances. And I'm just forever grateful for this journey that I've been on as I grow in my career and, get older and wiser, as I like to call it. I find that to be the case more and more, that I'm able to interact with people that really, really do see it as an opportunity to grow and they're not threatened by it.
I love that. And then you ended up working with lawyers. Fun fact, most people don't know. You actually helped us as we were kind of starting the firm, kind of plan out things and, find areas my prior firm, maybe we hadn't excelled in and fix those. Most people don't. They always wonder, they always say, wow, like what you did is so amazing. But the reality is it takes like an entire team of people, and Erica was one of them.
Well, that means a lot to me. Those are some of my best memories, helping in those early days. And you guys have you've absolutely taken flight, and I love to see it.
Hey, just trying to make you proud, Erica. Just every day. So we've had a few like people in the coaching arena on the podcast before. So I love asking this question. Why do business owners need a coach? Like, why even invest in one?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm a firm believer that we all, and when I say all, I'm preaching to the choir, we all need an outside third party person, mentor, coach, whatever word you want to use, who can really help us take a step back, look into our situation, into the business. As I mentioned before, that bird's eye view, I feel like it's impossible, looking at your own situation or your business, in this case, law firm, whatever we're referring to. It's really hard not to get stuck in the weeds because you eat, breathe, and sleep it on a daily basis. And I'm just a huge believer. The results I've seen by having coaches and mentors and trainers, you can liken it to a personal trainer also, right? Most people who hire someone to get a certain result and have that extra layer of accountability, they end up performing and achieving a level of results much higher than someone who tries to just go it on their own. So there's always exceptions to everything, but I've never seen a business, especially a private practice like a medical practice or a law practice, not benefit from having a coach and, break through barriers that they wouldn't have otherwise broken through.
That makes sense to me. So, you did I think you worked with medical professionals like as a newly minted coach, let's say, for 6 years or so.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then transitioned to law firms.
Practice. What's that?
And then you transitioned to law firms after.
Yes, that was the trajectory.
That's awesome. Helped grow, a big kind of coaching company. Like I think actually helped kind of get their coaching program started. And then I think at one point directed the whole program and then kind of moved on from there, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that was such a huge blessing. I will forever be grateful and humbled by that experience. I'm so grateful for every lesson that I learned there. And really, it really gave me a vision to, continue doing something that I know I'm called to do and influencing others in their businesses. So grateful for that experience and everything that led me up to today in this conversation.
Well, you eventually moved on and you started your own company, which is now Thrive Concepts. I think you guys have been around for a couple of years now.
That's right.
What caused you to make that decision?
I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit kind of boiling inside, as I like to call it. And I think kind of in the spirit of, coaching, right? When you're inspired by someone else to do something a certain way and to, tap into your potential and kind of shed those self-imposed limits, I decided that it was time for me to really flex that muscle and to really do something that I had full ownership of, was, had always been there, ever since I can remember, even as a preteen, I would date it back to. But life gets busy, and you have great opportunities, and you find wonderful companies to be a part of. So sometimes it's easy to stay stuck or comfortable. I mean that all in a positive way. It's easy to say, oh, like I can do that. That's maybe down the line, or maybe somebody else can do that. I'm not really cut out for this. And I just decided to break through that, self-imposed limit and do what I know I was called to do.
I love that. So let's talk about that then. So what is something that you've learned either about yourself or the business overall that you did not know as a result of kind of jumping out on your own and starting this thing?
Yeah, I will say for sure that I did not know how important it is for an actual coach to have a coach. So going back to our in the spirit of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, having a coach of my own and mentors of my own is, I consider it an absolute non-negotiable. And not that I didn't before, but it really reinforced it, being in that seat myself and realizing that, hey, this is a universal thing. And it, going back to, like I said, preaching to the choir, I did not realize how essential it was for someone who is, consulting and advising others to also have that same level of expertise being poured into me.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's like, is it just because it's another person? Because I mean, in theory, you have all the skills necessary, right, to build your own business and run it.
Right. I think that yes, it is the power of having that level of perspective, and especially for someone who has maybe gotten to levels or heights that we're aspiring to get to, right? And it's something that we're always, seeking outside wisdom from, and having someone who can really step in and guide us to the next level. I think it's absolutely essential.
That makes sense. I think sometimes we just can't see things, like
Right.
like we're doing it, we're in it day to day, so we think we see it, but someone else just looks at it like from afar. Like I know you've done that with us, you've kind
Yeah.
of looked at something I've said and been like, well, don't you think blah blah blah, and I'm like, no, I did not think that until just now, actually.
Right. Yeah. That's such a great point. And, things that may seem obvious to, that coach or that trainer or that consultant, whoever you're working with, something that may seem so obvious to them and is glaring at them, we as business owners, when we're in the weeds, we can't see it every time, right? And so we need that outside perspective, and we need that extra dose of, kind of pruning and examination to get underneath the layers and make sure that we're, really doing everything we possibly can to drive the results that we want.
That makes complete sense to me. So law firms, that's kind of mainly your experience. A lot of our listeners are not really law firms, but I think, if you're sitting at home, you're like a public adjuster or a contractor, I think you'll still pick it up, because at the end of the day, they're all businesses. So I have some
Right.
questions. Well, give us a few of the biggest areas in like a law firm's operations that you feel like they're commonly like lagging or falling behind.
I would say the first one, leadership and accountability. So I find a lot of, just phenomenally intelligent, productive people when I'm working with clients, but there's not necessarily an official leadership team or a sense of accountability in terms of, okay, Galen, you own this result, and Erica, you own this result. Fill in the blank, right? Name and result. I find that a lot of people are running around doing some great things and getting great results, but it's very disorganized. And that sense of, someone being in a particular seat and there's specific results and expectations attached to that, I find that that's not as common. And once a firm, gets to that level and starts employing that, the game really changes for the better.
That makes a lot of
Another,
sense. You've done that
yeah,
with us too, right? Like I noticed I would finish a call with you usually, and unless it had just gone way too long, you would kind of end the call with, okay, so we talked about these 7 things, like who is going to do this thing and when are they going to do it by, and who is going to do this
right,
thing and when are they going to do it by. And then there
right,
might be things for you to do following that. Like you might be like, oh, I'm going to send you this tool or I'm going to send you
Right.
this article, and like you'd even put that in the notes, like Erica's going to send this by Friday.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah, and it's that is a best practice that I will stand by. I think having clear ownership with deadlines is absolutely essential when you're trying to get initiatives across the finish line. I always think of the call 911 example, right? We're in a public place, a public setting, in a large group, and God forbid there's an emergency, and someone shouts, oh my gosh, call 911. And unless we have a clear owner, right, and we say, okay, let me know when you called 911, I might be thinking you're doing it, you're thinking I'm doing it, so on and so on. So it's absolutely, I consider having a clear accountability and ownership chart, so to speak, with leaders attached to that. Or even if you're not at the point where you have an official leadership team, sometimes that's a next phase for folks. Key players who own results and can report on that and say, okay, this is done, right? And this is where we're headed, next week or next month, and having the ability to really, really take those results and drive them and not just let them happen to us.
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so leadership accountability. You,
Yes.
you
Yep.
started to move to your second one, but I stopped you because I wanted to hear more. So what's your next one?
Yes. I'm glad we got to flesh that one out because that one is so important. I arguably the most important, depending on the situation. The other area I would say is having defined and documented systems or processes. So, and these don't have to be complicated, right? I'm a big less is more believer, in most cases. So it's interesting, asking many business owners, especially law firm owners, well, what's the process for that? So how does this get done? How do we handle this scenario? And I typically hear some wonderful information and great answers, and it all sounds great, but there's no way that they could, train. If someone started tomorrow in the team, there's no way they could, effectively train that person on that system or process because it's really just floating around in people's brains. And that also leaves, a lot of room for error, in my opinion, in my experience, from what I've seen, because if it's not documented in part of, the firm's non-negotiables, core values, all of the things that the firm operates on, then that we already have a margin of human error on any given day. That exponentially increases when it's not officialized in a living document. And these can be simple one pagers. They don't have to be anything crazy complicated. But I would say that's one other area. Another hill I will die on is that you've got to have those documented somewhere, if you really want to grow effectively.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that, right? I know that was like one of the things you got onto us about even before this firm, at my prior firm. You were
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
what does hiring a new person look like? And I was like, oh, well, CJ trains them. And you're
right,
like, cool. So all the things CJ's showing them, like, where is it
right,
documented? And I was like, well, I think they take notes while they're learning from CJ. And
right.
you're
Keyword is
like,
I
no.
think, right? I think, but sometimes we think something's happening, but the person might have the best intentions, but we may have never sat down with that person and clarified that expectation. So they're just winging it, thinking they're doing a great job, and maybe they are. But on any given day, that could go sideways, right? And especially if we want to grow, in a productive way, we need to have a little bit more of an officialization there.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right about that. It's so important. And without it, at the end of the day, you get inconsistent results, right? And I don't think it matters whether you're like, that's big if you're a law firm, arguably even
Yeah.
bigger if
Oh,
you're a
business.
doctor's office, but
Yeah.
still important if you're a public adjuster or a contractor, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. So many of these things are universal, and sometimes they apply, I think, more so in certain industries than others. So I could certainly see on that side of the coin, that's huge because there are very, strict, steps and, lockstep things that person has to go through to really get their job done.
Absolutely. All right. What would be the third area if we needed one more area that we could focus on regularly?
Yeah, it's got to be data and being able to report, track, certain key measurements of the business. Metrics, KPIs, whatever term you want to use. What are the pulse points of the business that on any given day, right? We need to know where we're at week to date, month to date, quarter to date. When you have a tighter grasp on those key data points, it's impossible to get, halfway through the year, or God forbid at the end of the year, and be surprised, as to where you're at. Anything that is tracked or measured is always going to improve. In some cases, it might be a marginal improvement. In some cases, it might be a, insanely huge improvement. But anything that you're tracking, whether you want that number to go up or go down, depending on the circumstance, anything you're tracking and reporting on, especially in documenting, going back to, area number 2, in some kind of database or scorecard or spreadsheet, that number is absolutely going to improve over time. And a lot of business owners I talk to, struggle with that. And that's something I've even really had to double down on in my own business, is making sure those key data points, I know exactly where they're at. And you as the business owner, you as a law firm owner, know exactly where they're at. And you're not just guessing and operating on feelings rather than the facts.
Amen. Are there any how do I want to phrase this? Are there any tools or softwares or anything you like for kind of collecting data, tracking data? Because I feel like we've done some podcasts on KPIs. We've done some podcasts on the importance of data. But, one of the common things I hear is I just don't even know where to start,
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest place to start is, a good old fashioned spreadsheet or Google Doc, whatever you prefer to use, whatever platform. And then making sure you have access to your case management software. The folks who are pulling that data need to make sure that they have the right access, admin access, to get the specific numbers from your case management software, and then consolidate, let's say you have 7 KPIs that you're tracking on a weekly basis, making sure that all of those are pulled from the appropriate platforms and consolidated into that spreadsheet. That's the easiest place to start. There are certainly some more robust platforms and systems. And, a lot of clients I work with, they are on the EOS system, for example. So there's some wonderful resources there. The list is endless as to the direction you could go here. But if you need a place to start with a spreadsheet, list the metrics. How frequently are you going to track and report on those? And then whomever is owning the data entry there, make sure they have access to your platforms to obtain that data week to date, month to date, whatever the case may be that you're tracking.
Absolutely. Yeah. So whatever y'all are using at home, especially the PAs and the contractors, if you're using AccuLinks or, Claim Wizard, whatever it is, they have reporting features. So what Eric is basically saying is make sure your people can run the reports they need to get that data, and just plug it into a freaking spreadsheet so you can see it side by side if you're not wanting to invest in some fancy software that'll create graphs for you.
Yeah. Again, less can be so much more, especially if this hasn't been, commonplace. And there's no better place to start than just the basics. So huge believer in that.
That's awesome. I love that. That was so easy too, Now I know you had kind of and you still do this, but you had kind of a side career, I'd call it. You took a little bit of time from coaching. I think still probably did a little bit, but not so much with law firms.
Yeah.
But you actually went into the client referral and generation side of the business, right?
Yes. This role was such a huge blessing to me. I was director of attorney relations for a large trial firm, and I essentially handled referral and co-counsel partnerships. And my role was to really foster those and, increase those. And it was such a wonderful experience. And it really, what I loved is I was able to use my, my love of relationship building to the nth degree in this case. And it was so great being able to be on the other side and not be a coach or trainer at all during that time. It was so great to, have that different dynamic and perspective inside the law firm to see so much of how things are done, behind the scenes, and to be able to then, take that back out into the world. So I absolutely, I'm so thankful for that role. And I met so many wonderful people during that time that I still keep in touch with.
So I got to ask you, in your mind, like, what's the secret to like increasing those referrals and stuff and creating those relationships? Like, what was your approach?
Yeah, be intentional. And I know that's many people can define that, a million different ways, of course, but intentional to me is leading with your authenticity of, what you bring to the table for that relationship, and always asking how can you support someone else before you're asking for their support. I'm a huge believer in that. And really being intentional and educating people about how they can support you, so having a win-win, a mutually beneficial relationship in a business is always great. Sometimes it's not going to be perfectly even, right? And that's totally okay. But taking the time to, in my case, I really took the time to explain what types of cases and clients we were looking to take on, and what types of clients we wanted to serve and impact their lives, and not just treating it as an an interaction and a quote unquote sales role. I think that can easily, roles like that can easily get muddied and become very transactional if you're not careful. So just being really intentional in the level of care you put into the conversations, the outreach, the follow up, sending gifts. I'm a huge believer in that, to really show appreciation and being intentional even in what you choose to send someone, and taking the time to get to know who they are as a person and a business owner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? The difference between I don't want to say anything that'll upset anyone, but a box of pears versus like, hey, I know you really like this thing, so I went and picked it out for you,
Right. Your favorite sports team, or your favorite restaurant, fill in the blank. Just taking that time just to get to know people, even on a basic level, can really help you establish long-term relationships and friendships.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're absolutely right. Every time, and it's not often, but every time I get a gift where I can tell like whoever that is, even a potential vendor, like you really want to get my attention as a potential vendor, like send me something that shows you actually paid attention to a discussion we had,
Right.
instead of sending me like a cake or something over Christmas. Like I get so many assorted boxes of chocolate around Christmas, and those are nice. I like give them to the staff, but the card gets thrown away, and the box of chocolate gets sent upstairs for everyone to split up. But you send something that like dovetails into a conversation, something I want to keep. It like stays on my desk. It works its way to my car. It works its way home, and every time I see it, I'm like, oh, that was so nice of so and so.
Yes, that's so true. And you really want to be memorable. And there's so many, speaking, going back to the coaching theme, there's so many programs and coaching specifically on gifting, right? And there's so many ways you can really just increase your knowledge and your wherewithal even in that space alone, because a lot of these things they're not necessarily inherent skills, right? And some they may come more naturally to some people than others, but there's so many resources out there to whatever result you're trying to get or whatever you're trying to accomplish in your life, right? There are experts there who can guide you. So going back to just our overall theme of coaching, it's so important to seek out outside perspective, especially for something that you might need help with.
I could not agree more, Erica. All right. You've been great. We're almost out of time. So before we do go, Erica, what does it mean to you to level up?
Level up. I believe that means to stay curious and to always be looking for a better and more intentional way to do things. Whatever field you're in, whatever industry you're in, it doesn't matter. I say the answer is stay curious.
I love that. Thank you so much for being with us today, Erica.
So good to see you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank Erica for joining us on the show. Identifying those 3 key areas that law firms, or really any other business, can grow on are incredibly helpful. And her end advice was even more important. Be mindful and intentional in the actions you take. Wouldn't we all be better if we just did that? Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.